See, I see that all this destruction is just the process of transformation. The question is whether they'll keep it together in the process of transformation. And that's why all I'm interested in doing is becoming a person and helping others become a person who, in the process of the dramatic stuff, will keep some equanimity and keep there's some love and some presence in that process. But that's psychedelics may play a role in that. So you're right. That goes back to your statement.
Well, see, my assumption in trying to think about thousands of psychedelic trips rather than just mine, what they seem to do generically is they seem to dissolve boundaries.
Yeah.
And the ego is in the business of creating, maintaining, and defending boundaries. So I really see the psychedelics as directly intervening in the core process which is running us over the edge, which is our inability to emotionally connect with the consequences of what we're doing. If for a single moment we could feel what we're doing, we would stop. Well, see, the nice thing about this is that you can sort of make the snake take its tail in its mouth, because
it does.
The escape is not into some science fiction future.
No.
It's into an archaic recursion of some sort. We once knew everything we need to know.
Yeah.
So what we are trying to find out is lost knowledge, not new knowledge. And if you direct people back toward 10,000, 20,000 years ago, they see a kind of completion that an open-ended future is.
Seems to me it's a confusing thing to use time in that way, because it makes the artifacts of that period seem to be valued as opposed to the artifacts of this period. It seems to me that I mean, whether you call it not science fiction, but science fiction can also be very compassionate. It can be very historically relevant. It doesn't have to be, it's just using a different set of artifacts to work with. So,
well, for instance, I see most of what's happened in the 20th century as being unconsciously driven by this fascination with the archaic.
Fascination with the archaic?
Yes. I mean,
wow, that was, of all the things I predicted you'd say, it wasn't that. Tell me what.
Well, for instance, Impressionism deconstructs the hard image of realism and gives you a feeling tone thing, which was very antithetical to Victorian Edwardian thought. Then Freud and Jung describe different aspects of the unconscious, but to do it, Freud has to talk about repressed, primitive sexual imaginings. Jung talks about folklore, fairy tales, and mythology. Meanwhile, the Dadaists and the Surrealists are saying we have to break up the linear expectations of the bourgeois mind. And then you get at Jackson Pollock and those people who say the image itself has to be thrown out. And then, to my mind, the psychedelic thing in the 60s, based on rock and roll and a boundary-dissolving psychedelic, we, almost by a random walk, are finding our way toward shamanism, tribalism, nomadism.
Go beyond the isms to find out, tell me what we're really finding.
We're finding a world made out of mind rather than stuff.
Right, okay, we're finding a world made out of mind. Every time you describe which mind you find, that's just a limiting condition. I mean, if we just find the thing of mind-created stuff, live in that, then what happens?
Well, I mean, there is a transcendental dimension beyond language. It's just hard as hell to talk about it.
But if you live in it and talk from there, then the forms that it will manifest in become just the forms it manifests in. It's nothing more or less than that. So
you mean you download the unspeakable into language and let the chips fall where they may?
Well, they don't fall where they may. They fall in a perfectly harmonious pattern. They call it.
Well, that's them falling where they may.
Where they may, where they will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so what I'm hearing from you is you have a very strong sense of the pattern, strong enough that you're limited necessarily limited personal viewpoint doesn't tend to get in the way. You can always push the reset to hope button, and then you hope, almost on principle.
Trump has said to me, stand halfway between hope and hopelessness. I thought that was very useful.
And is that
No.
what is it? It's
It's the ecstasy of total horror and total beauty at the same moment. That's what I feel again and again, Terence. When I'm with somebody dying of AIDS, my God, my heart's breaking. It's horrible. It's a ghastly social ostracization, this, that, opportunistic illness, and everything. And there's another part of me that's giggling. And I can hardly handle the multifrenia of it all, sense of the perfection of it all, and the beauty of the moment, and the horrible shit of it.
Well, it all is spun together. Is that because you feel confident that the self is somehow indestructible, or because you don't even answer that question?
You got to watch the words indestructible, because that has a time dimension. I mean, I think that awareness is that,
for example, do you think this is the stage upon which all acts are performed, or that we move up and down
stages.
many levels?
Infinite number of, probably infinite number, because I just look into two minds and I see two different ones, and those are all on just this one. No, I feel like I have this friend Emmanuel, this spook that has no body, and Emmanuel's two lines to me were, death is absolutely safe. First thing, that's a very profound statement. The next thing he said, it was like taking out the tight shoe. And then I said to him, Emmanuel, what am I doing here? Who made this error? What am I doing on this claim? He said, you're in school. Why don't you try taking the curriculum?
And the curriculum is
Life.
any life?
It means the exploration of the clinging of mind within the world of projected form.
So the exploring life.
It's the exploring life with its purpose in the sense of returning back into the Garden of Eden. It's a return. There is a return metaphor underlying all of it.
And I'm sure you're asked this all the time, so am I. And maybe we give different answers. Do you think that this can be done without psychedelics fast enough to have an impact on the global situation?
I could conceive that it could be. You asked, do I think? I don't really have an opinion whether it will or won't, but I could see it go either way.
Well,
I mean, like John Seed said to me, it's too late as far as the rainforest is concerned. He says the inertia is too great in the whole system. It's too late. So I said, okay, John. I mean, it was the first time somebody said it to me just like that. He said, it would take a miracle. I said, oh, that threw me back on whatever that was. And then he said, but after all, he said, we came up out of the ocean and came onto land. He said, we have quite a lineage of miracles. I wouldn't underestimate this. That was a nice one.
well, so my question to you is, are psychedelics a miracle?
Psychedelics are a miracle, yes. They may not be the only miracle.
Are they the miracle we need?
I don't know that. I think they may have already done what they were to do.
Really?
Yeah. I think
I've never heard him.
I think what is done is so much more powerful than anybody yet recognizes.
But we do.
It's interesting because you take images that all of us know of a girl running down the street naked in Cambodia, or something like that. And we say that wasn't strong enough. It won the Life of the Year award, but it wasn't strong enough. It didn't stop everybody and say, holy shit, what are we doing here? So what would be strong enough to do that? And you say, well, psychedelics, but that's it's in a one-on-one thing. I mean, we're talking major game players at this moment. put China into your computer. How do you deal with, either you're spraying it or it's water or it's some other level of consciousness that does it. There is a certain level of trauma that's possible that can soften the ground, right? Not 3 Mile Island and not Chernobyl, but I don't want to create this with my mind, but I can imagine a certain trauma, like in Marin when they ran out of water.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting. Suddenly, all the ego barriers and everything, and neighbors were talking with everyone, met each other.
People were taking
and
showers.
The whole process was happening. I'm sure marriages, babies were conceived, everything as a result of that trauma, of that denial. So a massive, significant trauma. I just got to tell you one scary image. There's a saint in India who lived up to about 1930, I cut this up. And one of his devotees said to me one night, he was sort of looking off in distance, he said, there'll come a time, he said, when you'll walk 5 miles, and said, you'll sight the light from a fire of another person, and you'll be so happy to know another person exists.
Oh, don't get it.
Quite a prediction. Isn't that quite a prediction? Yeah. It's in there. It's just in there somewhere.
Interesting. Yes, well, I agree. I think that what's going to happen is that...
Gentlemen, everything is fine with the evolution of coffee and consciousness. Both very good with you too.
You have come just at the right time.
Yes,
this is just what I want. How did you know? You tuned into a higher level.
A higher level. Level high, very high, yes. I eat Bohemian mushroom soup today.
We were just talking about that.
Oh, yes. You like Bohemian mushroom soup?
I like
Let me
mushroom.
sprinkle liberally some water on your chalice, sir.
Oh, please
That is,
liberally
this one.
sprinkle his chalice.
Yes.
For sure.
Very,
I am a cellist, so it's fine if you wish to.
oh, I know you by your true name. You're Mr. Chalice, sir.
Yes.
Yes. Very good. You also some water in your... No.
No.
I was confused. Let me put this here and have fun with the shaman strudel. Bohemian, very good.
Thank you.
You call when things are getting dangerous.
I'll call you.
I'll be right back.
Not to worry.
Good, good.
Can I ask you a personal question?
You can ask me anything you'd like, Terence.
It's not a personal question to you. It's a personal question from me. How do you like having the projection of special identity constantly laid on?
It's a sadhana. It's my practice.
That's a good answer. Although you didn't say how you liked it.
I like it to the capacity I have to transpose it. If I can't, sometimes these are going very fast, and to just keep it transposed, then I love it. I love it. It's like a fire. If the minute I start to lose it, it's a fucking drag. It really is. Because, I was in a situation in Miami where all these women with blue eyes and luxuriant hair were grabbing at the buttons of my jacket. And I thought, oh, I don't want this. Whatever this life is, I don't want to be part of this. This is, they eat your flesh, finally.
Sure.
But I realize at any time, I can walk away from it. It's my, I'm free agent.
So do you never get in a situation where you say, gee, I'd like to do X, but Ram Dass would never do that?
My stock and trade, or my coinage, is in sharing just those predicaments publicly. See, I've turned it into, right?
You've managed to, but public confession is the subtlest form of wastery.
Of what story?
I do it myself. Say, I'm not a good guy. Don't follow me. I'm a bad guy. Then I leave the stage and say, now I can really be a bad guy.
Come up and see my holy pictures. That's one of my lines in my lecture. I'll tell you, I only see the stuff that would disturb me is inside myself. It has nothing to do with out there. Out there is just being what it is, and I'm responding with my own stuff. And if my stuff is my enemy, it's going to get too much for me. And if it isn't, Depends on how much I can consume it, joyfully participate in it, passionately, all of it.
Yeah, but, well, you've sort of achieved a unique synthesis. I mean, you're almost a secular holy man, because I don't care much about what you believe or who you light candles to. Basically,
Yeah.
I think I heard you describe yourself once as a kind man. And you've gotten incredible mileage out of that because there are so few.
It's far out.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is...
Well, when you talked about coming back into the boundarylessness, to me, that's the whole quality of compassion. Has that boundarylessness to it. It's that your suffering is my suffering, and your joy is my suffering, and you are me, and here we are. And if you hurt, I'm responding to your hurt, not because I'm a good guy and you're needful, just because this is suffering, and this is the response to suffering. And we're both part of the same thing. And that's the way I like to play it from. That's, to me, it's like riding a wave. It's the joy of just being part of the force of compassion for you.
Sorry, but well, when you look, you mentioned in your talk the other night, since some people think the 90s are going to be a second turn of the spiral, I observed the 60s as a spear-carrying 14-year-old. I was down in the masses. What were the mistakes that are avoidable if there's a second change?
They're inevitably going to be avoided. The first mistake was idealism. The first mistake, and the mistake was thinking that because you had seen it, you could just go like that and everybody else would see it. And you could just say, it's all love, and then everybody would love. I mean, it was a naivete. It was naivete. It was not working on ourselves deeply enough to be without the clinging of mind that made us try to use it. It was our lurking righteousness that got in our way.
Can you make a revolution, though, without an inner righteousness?
That's the far out question of where would the action come from? And there's this line in Buddhism that says, out of emptiness arises compassion. And what I experience is that there is a way in which I can sit down in front of a truck or feed a person or go make love or go surf, and there is an appropriateness in every one of those acts. And for me to hear that, I'm really going to shut up. And my work is to keep shutting up, to hear which one it is. And if it is a revolution, so be it.
Mm-hmm.
So be it. You know the story of the monk and the army general, and the army general's disemboweling all the monks? And his reputation has spread far and wide as a cruel, cruel man. And he comes into this village and he says to his adjutant, tell me what's happening. The adjutant said, all the people are frightened, they're bowing down to you. All the monks in the monastery have fled to the hills but one monk. And the general is outraged about this one monk. And he gets up and he goes to the monastery and he pushes open the doors of the monastery and he walks into the courtyard, and there's the monk standing in the middle of the courtyard. And he walks up to him and he says, don't you know who I am? I could take my sword and run it through your belly without blinking an eye. And don't you know who I am? I could have your sword run through my belly without blinking. That's great. That's the place from which revolutions can heal, rather than just starting the cycle all over again.
Then this is the place we never found in the 60s. I mean, I've always said it was all
we
well
reduced
and good.
it to revolution and although we had the taste of evolution, we reduced it to revolution.
Well, and the day they came with machine guns, we didn't stand like that monk. Everybody said, oh my God, you could get killed playing this game. And I flew to Laos and India for 3 years.
But already we had produced the they by being so busy being we.
True.
Because so that they even noticed we. The fact that they noticed us was because we were busy we were busy making statements instead of just being it.
So maybe, I mean, this is just occurring to me, that being in a place like Prague, the real thing we have to learn here is how to make velvet revolutions, non-confrontation.
Exactly right. Exactly right. That's why I admire Havel so much. That's why he's way up there in my, because he's a compassionate leader. He's got wisdom, not just knowledge. He is true. There's a quality of his heart that feels present. And he said in this op-ed article, I just read his letter last month. I read it too. And you know, at one point he said, we have to allow the naturalness to come back, the personal stuff, the heart stuff. I mean, he was right there with all of the.
Do you see, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't. Let me preface it by saying, do you see anybody who could play that role for the millions of kids in England and the United States who are now asking, where do we go from here?
No.
Is that good or bad?
I guess the situation hasn't demanded the emergence of that being it, of those kinds, because it can't be anybody that comes forward and says, I'm it.
Oh no, it has to be someone who the
But the
people say
situation
you're
in
it.
demand, the formation. I mean, you watch, does the man make the time or the time make the man? You know, and you can feel how what took a certain person 20 years, like to ride a bicycle, somebody later on can ride a bicycle like that because the whole culture rides bicycles. There's some a process where the situation emerged where the person has to come forward or they're just forced out. I mean, I go and I look at all the senators that are running for this or that, and I go to breakfast with them and I listen and I tune. And Jerry Brown I hung out with, and I said, you know, he's got interesting ideas, but his heart, my God, he's got work to do. This poor guy, he's suffering so much. And I love him and I want those ideas out, but I want him to work on himself, you know? And so I don't
do
see
you
anybody
really care in terms of political terms whether Jerry Brown makes himself palatable to an electorate?
I care because I work with the Mayan widows in Guatemala, and I feel like I'm representing them, and our government, our administration's policies are killing them and their children and their husbands. And some way I've got to play my part as a member of a society that is imposing so much suffering on so many people. I can't just walk away and say, oh, I'm helping the nice Mayans. I've also got to realize I'm an American citizen that's hurting the Mayans, and I've got to play both games to change one way and to do the other.
So there's a kind of, not to go egghead here, but a kind of coincidentia positorum, because on one level what you're saying is, it's all right, don't worry. And on another level, you clearly are involved in a search for defining your role, where you would do some good.
Optimum judo move.
Optimum judo move. So it isn't enough to just say the system will take care of
But
itself.
I am part of the system that is taking care of itself.
So it's a
Whether
sense
I'm
of
standing
acting
inside of it.
without acting through self.
It's being not identified with the actor and not being identified with the fruits of the action. That's, I mean, to me, one of my basic texts is the Bhagavad Gita, and those are the two injunctions.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hear those. And they're very weird. How you do an act when you're not identified with being the actor and you're not attached to truth. I mean, I lead this funny, continuous paradox that suffering stinks and suffering's grace. And I live with both of those all the time.
Well, I think most people do.
I think most people have taken a position.
Oh, that suffering is bad, they hate it, they want to keep it
or
away
that it's
from.
grace, that it's, love it.
Well, and then the great masses of people never really draw the distinction, because for them suffering is like air and water.
It's life. It's life.
It comes with
It's life.
burying the many children you bear.
That's why I found in the villages in India less suffering than I found around the middle class in America.
Certainly less whining.
Well, less preoccupation with what they don't have.
Well, they have a philosophy of reincarnation that must sustain them.
There is something else that's feeding them.
Where we have a philosophy of, if you don't get it now,
No,
you
never
never
will.
will.
Exactly. We threw out in the councils of Nicaea, Trent, and Constantinople just the thing that was healed, but we did it so that the church could have power over. Well,
I think it was Friedrich Nietzsche who said there was only one Christian and they crucified him.
Yes, exactly. Oh, God, that's so good. It's such a good line. Here comes.
Now, have you been waiting for me? Because I'm the waiter, I need to wait.
We've been looking everywhere for you,
Oh,
sir.
I'm sorry. I've been waiting for the here and now, but that was somewhere else.
Well,
But can I help you here? It's
you can help us here, and you can help us
now.
there.
Very good. I'll help you here. I hope you enjoy my conversation. No, I mean,
It's fine. Do we
when
get a
you
check, or is this all on the house?
No, I am the check. I am the check. This is Prague, my sir. God is everywhere, but Czechland is here, you know?
Right.
Okay. I keep one more bottle for you in
Please,
the
yes,
refrigerator.
Hold it and
But not in the
reserve.
here and now. In the somewhere else, maybe later. See you.
Well, I was asking you, what did we do wrong in the 60s?
Yeah.
One thing that has occurred to me, and I certainly felt it with my friends, was we assumed it would go on forever. We had no notion of window of opportunity.
Yes.
We just thought we'd
Yeah.
blown the doors off
Yeah.
the hinges and they would
Yeah.
never be put back on.
Yeah.
To me, the most amazing transformation in my lifetime is not the revolution of the 60s, but the counter-revolution of the 70s, where they managed to put the cuckoo clock back together again, even though we'd kicked it all
Did they or
over the...
didn't they? That's what I'm. See, you keep thinking there was that opportunity and it closed, and I think it happened then. And all of the 70s and 80s, all that was this kind of reverberation to this process. And that I'm here and you're here and we're both still here as the 90s. And I got a lot of people that, I talk now in middle America. And I look at my audiences and they've never taken dope. They've never read Eastern holy books or anything. And I just say the same stuff I was saying in the 60s that I was saying to people with flowers and big pupils. And these people in the middle, they're corseted, nice people. And they're going, and I think, far out, look, it happened. And I was looking the other way.
Well, that's true.
And that's where you're looking for the resonance of a person to come forth that speaks for that consciousness with the assurance of the truth of it.
Right.
That's what I think, why all this business of a Christ figure, I mean, I see where how seductive it is, but how we got very cynical because we projected into such a person a purpose, a purpose, instead of just that light forming out of the needs of the moment to create that light, to which, as I find, if I speak from a true enough for a moment, when I can do it, from a true enough place in my heart, it reduces the paranoia, the subtle veils of paranoia in another person. I don't do it to them, it just falls away. Because they're testing, and they don't get from me anything that says like that. And I just watch them like a cloud. And I think, boy, I give a lot to just be that instrument. That's what we're.
Well, that's a great role.
But there's a role for every one of us. That's the role. That's what I said to the ITA. I said, just don't talk about it.
Exemplify
Let's do it.
it.
Let's be it.
Do it.
That's it.
Well, Blake said a wonderful thing. He said, if I can get it right, if the truth can be told so as to be understood, it will be believed.
Right. Exactly.
So all you have to do is say it.
Exactly. When can you say it simply enough? Is it only said in silence simply enough? Or are there words? Or is there music? Or is there more? Or is there...
There's words, there's music, there's silence, there's gesture, because it's always going to exceed one's grasp.
See, my mantra is the Gandhi line, my life is my message.
You said that the other night. That's very good.
Of every level of being.
I think I'm at a little lower level because I'm very aware that I have to struggle to say my life is my message. I would almost rather say my message is my message. Please don't look at my life because I'm a fallible human being and I'm constantly
But
fucking
you see
up.
how that weakens your message. You see how that quality means that the message doesn't come from the root, the central. There's a way in which it waffles.
True.
And that's the thing. I really can't. Once I saw the possibility of that, I said, why waffle? What is worth holding on to that's worth waffling about?
Well, I once said to Leo Zeff, I'm sure you knew Leo, I said to him in a meeting, I said, Leo, you're finished, you're completed, you're baked. Me, I'm half-baked. And I hope that the rest of my life will finish the baking
You're
process.
not half-baked. That's what's interesting. I mean, when you and I talk, you and I hear each other perfectly. Truth. And so where are we hearing each other from? I mean, then we each play our game the way we play our game, and you can play your game saying I'm half-baked. That's your strategy if you choose.
It's a mercurial strategy.
Yes, I understand. It's such a...
Here's to Mercurius.
Good.
You have somehow been able to survive the gauntlet of American media in a way that your colleagues and comrade in arms didn't seem to. They either had to step away from their leader role or they transmuted it into some lesser thing. So now Allen Ginsberg is poet laureate, Tim Leary is, keeps the club scene in Los
Socrates
Angeles
is the LA club
interesting.
scene,
Yes. But you, in a sense, never backed down, never retooled. You were also not first among equals back in the original thing. But when all is said and done,
I was always his second. In a way, it's like birds. If you stay just behind the lead bird, you don't have to do much. You're just kind of riding along on the...
well, and Ralph tells me to be third is the real good position. It's like being the young prince. You won't ever be king.
It was only until about 5 years ago that in the past 5 years, they've stopped introducing me as Tim Leary's partner.
Right.
And which, I think that was great. I see him as one of my, first teachers, great teacher.
Uh-huh.
And, but I don't have the fun for me. It says, I have no model of myself. I don't know who I am. I don't know whether I'm an anachronism from the 60s or I'm just about to have
A prophet to be.
Yes, I have no idea. And I don't care. That's what I saw. Because either of them, all the things you get in either way are a drag and an abuse.
No, well, I think you're a prophet to be. I think we all are. But,
We all are.
as Bilbo Baggins once said, the greatest adventure still lies ahead. I believe that. I'll believe that when they lower my box.
I do too. Exactly. Good, exactly.
Well, thanks for coming by. I'm sure you had many, many demands on you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I was afraid of you up until now. Now I'm delighted to meet
No,
you.
don't be afraid of me. The people who are afraid of me don't know me, or they know me better than
I
you
know.
ever will.
Perhaps it would be helpful at this time to look at a model of Jung's understanding of the psyche. If we take this circle as the self that includes the known, the unknown, everything, and if we hold this line as the threshold of consciousness, by threshold, I mean it's that space when you're waking up, when you just come over into this world, or you can fall back into sleep. Here is the unconscious, here is the so-called world of consciousness. Between those two is this little tiny ego, tiny little thing. And yet all of our world, our reality, moves through that space. It's partly in the unconscious, partly in consciousness.
The only way to meet a persecuting demon is to turn around and to say, here I am, what do you want from me? Then the nightmarish pursuer generally changes face. It simply represents that we have turned away from some part of our psyche, and therefore it runs after us. It wants to get at us, literally. But we don't want it. The unconscious shows us the face we show it. If we reject something within us, then it becomes destructive to us. And if we don't reject it, that's what I mean by saying, turning around and saying, in a friendly manner, what do you want? Then you suddenly see that it isn't so bad. Then you have a chance that whatever pursues one shows a more amenable face, and that one can make some pact with it or some arrangement. Mechanism, so to speak. I mean, projection and reflection are a pair of opposite. Mm-hmm. Because projection, as the word says, throws behind your back your own psychic images and contents into the outer world. We live all the time in projections. We live in a world of projection. And reflection is the act by taking that back into yourself. But you can't do that by your own willpower. I mean, you have to be helped by the self.
Mm-hmm. So both of these activities of the psyche are below the ego or beyond the ego. It's not a will.
Oh yes, they are beyond the ego, but the ego can cooperate with them or persevere in wrong. For instance, Jung defines in a narrower sense projection that we can only speak of a projection, though it's constant projection. What I think about you is a projection. What I think about all these people is a projection. I don't know you well enough to really know you. I have an image and I have a judgment, an intuitive judgment, but it's probably a lot of my own psyche in it. And but that you cannot call projection. Jung says in a strict sense, you can only begin to call it projection when it's disturbing, when there is a disturbance. When I, for instance, constantly quarrel with you or constantly misunderstand you, and it becomes a kind of difficulty between you and me, then one can speak of a projection. And that is also the symptom which shows now the moment is to take it back, to reflect. The disturbance is the symptom which wants you to reflect. And to say, now, why am I so emotional? Or why do I have these negative feelings each time I meet that person, or so on?
And that is the beginning of reflection?
And that's the beginning of reflection, but it's only achieved when you really see in yourself that quality which irritates you or which you admire in the other.
In the unconscious, as Jung understood it, there are these floating islands in this vast sea. And these are known as the complexes. They are energy centers, and they have at their core what he calls archetypes. And those archetypes are immense energy, divine energy, that have the power to knock the ego right out. From the Jungian point of view, this is a very dangerous space to be in, because the ego has lost its power, the complex is taken over, and the archetypal energy is at work. Now, in a well-working psyche, the ego is strong enough to hold that complex in abeyance. And yes, let it develop, let it mature, but not to allow the archetype to take over. The archetype will be more powerful than the ego later on. When, for example, you have an ego strong enough to write, well trained that it can play music, and the ego can be forgotten while the archetypal energy is moving through. Or in prayer, for example, The ego is out of the road. The prayer is coming through. The archetypal energy is essential to life in the dimension that we as human beings relate to it.
Our ego and is by our education forced to wear a lot of masks and to behave in a unnatural form, and therefore we repress all sorts of natural animal reactions and simple human reactions out of politeness and good manners and whatever the situation requires. For people to learn to know their shadow and to live their shadow a bit more, it makes them generally more accessible and more natural and more round and human altogether. People without shadow who are perfect inflict an inferiority on their surrounding and irritate their surrounding. And that's why one is so relieved if something nasty happens to them and say, thank God he's also only human. I've noticed that analysts try to be very correct with their patients, but sometimes there's a slip-off. And I've often noticed that when I produce a real slip-off in an analytical hour and the patient can make me powerful reproaches, it improves our relationship. Because the analysants feel, oh, after all, von Franz is only human, and now I feel above her, and I'll pardon her. And that's a good feeling. And then one has a more natural human being to human being relationship. The shadow is really our best social function. It integrates us into the group. With our good qualities, we are above the group. With our shadow, we are man among men. And human all too human. And that is that's why the shadow is very often in dreams represented as something important, or which one should love or accept, or not scorn, but fully accept within oneself.
Well, I'm aware of how late in the day it is, and I know some of you must be double parked, so I'll make this as succinct as possible. This morning's discussion caused me to wonder how much we would understand about electricity if our method of studying it was to stand on the tops of high hills and wait to be struck by lightning. It seems to me that's sort of the position that we're in vis-a-vis the UFOs. We have no real theory. We have conjectures. We have fiercely defended hypotheses, but we have very little that is concrete to go on. It's almost as though the issue of the UFO were an onion, and as we peel the layers of the onion, we discover when we get to the center that there is nothing there whatsoever left. It reminds me that if you cross an onion with a UFO, what you get is a flying saucer that brings tears to your eyes. And so what I would like to do is, just based on the notes I took today, to review what the options available to us are in terms of trying to get some kind of intellectual handle on this phenomenon, and I'll move through them rather quickly. One possibility that I suppose is now out of fashion because it wasn't mentioned here today, other than what Jacques said about ball lightning and plasmas, is that the UFOs are somehow natural phenomena, perhaps piezoelectric forces that have an ability to interact with the delicate electrochemical machinery of the human nervous system to create an impression of hallucination or visitation or abduction. That's one possibility. The more serious contenders as explanations, I think, fall into three categories. Is it us? Are we being visited? Or is there another tenant in the building that we are unaware of? And my own feeling about this tends to vacillate. I have had contact experiences. I have seen a UFO very close. I have met with entities from other dimensions, and it has not impelled me to take a strong position. I paid very close attention when these experiences were happening to me, and there always seemed to be loose ends that argue against whatever hypothesis seems currently most attractive. And though Jacques didn't mention it today, I recall in his book, The Invisible College, he stressed the absurdity that seems to attend the contact experience, that if the contactee will truly tell the unvarnished truth, then there will be elements in the story which will make the contactee look like a moron. In other words, the invalidation of the experience is an inimical part of its structure, almost as though the entities were saying, well, you may tell this story if you wish, but if you tell it truthfully, you'll be taken for a fool. Well, there's nothing wrong with being taken for a fool, except that it does seal the phenomenon rather nicely away from the very sober ladies and gentlemen who are making their careers in some branch of science. They are not interested in investigating the kinky, the anecdotal, the possibly pathological. In preparation for this conference, I reread Carl Jung's book published in 1954 called Flying Saucers, A Modern Myth of Things Seen in the Sky. And to my mind, no one has really gone beyond Jung. He understood very clearly that saying that something is a denizen of the psychic realm no way precludes its also having efficacious force in the physical realm through the phenomenon which he called synchronicity. Some of the points which Jacques made today about the nature of the medical examinations that are reported, they are absurd. They are unnecessary to be performed at our level of technology, let alone any future more advanced level that we might be asked to believe in. So if the UFO phenomenon is something that is coming from us, then what is it and what is it for? And I've given a good deal of thought to this question over the years because I tend to lean toward the notion that the UFO problem, like many subtle problems, is haunted by our own naivete concerning language. If I were to randomly choose, and don't worry, I shan't, 5 of you to come up here, and each one of you would have 40 seconds to explain to the rest of us what an atom is, it would be preposterous. None of us know. I doubt there's a person in this room who can give an account of the atom that tallies with the quote-unquote orthodox description of the atom. So there is a curious fuzziness about the most mundane parts of reality when we really attempt to magnify and understand them in the clear light of consciousness. How much more ambiguity there is then, naturally, attendant upon the examination of any kind of phenomena which are rare or tend to be fringy. So it isn't a matter of achieving consensus over the UFO. We can't even achieve consensus about what constitutes a decent souffle. So this passionate desire to drag us all under the umbrella of a single explanation is, I think, missing the point. To my mind, if the UFO phenomena is something arising out of the superego of the human psychic organization, then we should ask why. What is it doing? And I don't want to sound like a public relations agent for Jacques Vallée, but to my mind, with the exception of Jung, Jacques is the only commentator on the phenomenon who has really pushed the frontier back. To my mind, in The Invisible College, when Vallée says, in looking at the effect, not asking the question, what is it, but what does it do, you very quickly see what the flying saucers are doing. What they are doing is eroding faith in science. They are an antidote to the scientific paradigm that has evolved over the past 400 years and which has led us to the brink of global catastrophe. So the notion being developed here is that within the structure of the human psyche, there is something like a governor, something like a monitoring circuit, which when a society begins to evolve in a pathological or lethal direction, phenomena can be induced not by the egos of men and women, not by their institutions, but by the overmind, the collectivity of the human species. Phenomena can be induced which are so corrosive to the ideologies currently in place that their underpinnings are cut away, their validity is called into question, and their programs for social development and control are invalidated and destroyed. Now, a perfect example of this is the rise of infant Christianity. If you'll cast your mind back to the situation in the early years of the Christian era, and imagine the mentality of a Roman aristocrat, a person of power in Roman society. Their physics is drawn from Democracy and atomism. In other words, they are thoroughgoing materialists. Their social theory is drawn from Epictetus and Plato. They are, in fact, extremely modern people by our own standards. However, among the gardeners and kitchen help and stable boys, there is news of a momentous event in the Middle East. A Jewish rabbi has triumphed over death and risen after 3 days in the tomb. Should the master of a Roman household have caught wind of this kind of superstitious talk among the help, he would have just dismissed it with a sneer. What a preposterous idea. And it is a preposterous idea. Nevertheless, the fact that an idea is preposterous has never held it back from making zealous converts. And within 120 years after the Annunciation of the birth of Christianity, its missionaries were beating on the gates of Rome, attempting to convert the emperor. Now I see a similar situation in the modern context, that rationalism, scientific technology, which began and came out of the scholasticism of the Middle Ages and the quite legitimate wish to glorify God through an appreciation of His natural world, turned into a kind of demonic pact, a kind of descent into the underworld, a a.k.a., if you will, leading to the present cultural and political impasse that involves massive stockpiles of atomic weapons, huge propagandized populations cut off from any knowledge of their real histories, male-dominated organizations plying their message of lethal destruction and inevitable historical advance. And into this situation comes suddenly an anomaly, something which cannot be explained. I believe that that is the purpose of the UFO, to inject uncertainty into the male-dominated, paternalistic, rational, solar myth under which we are suffering. So I suppose if you had to categorize this point of view, you would say I'm taking a depth psychological, psychoanalytic point of view. What I'm saying is that the UFO is nothing more than an assertion of herself by the goddess into history, saying to science and paternalistically governed and driven organizations, you have gone far enough. We are going to turn the world upside down. Your science is going to be shown up for what it is. Nothing more than a pleasant metaphor usefully extrapolated into the production of toys for healthy children. That's what science is good for. It is not some meta-theory at whose feet every point of view from astrology to acupressure to channeling need be laid to have the hand of science announce thumbs up or thumbs down. Now, there is another possibility which can be dovetailed into the first. It is that it is not so much the oversoul or the superego of the human species which is responsible for stopping scientific masculine paternalism in its tracks, but rather that, unbeknownst to self-absorbed and myopic human beings, we have always shared, or at least for a very long period of time, have shared this planet with another intelligent species, another entity, which may have been perfectly content to allow us to abide in our ignorance of its presence until the point where it came to its awareness that our style was toxifying, ruining, raping, and perverting the planet. And at that point, this thing springs into action with similar end results as the previous scenario, the invocation of the superego. It's astonishing to me that in the 45 years that the UFO, are we being visited question has been kicked around, I have never seen in any UFO book or publication the suggestion made that if we believe we are being visited by organic, intelligent life forms from some other dimension or place in the galaxy, then we should very, very thoroughly examine the ecology of this planet for traces of its presence. What assurance do we have that the several million life forms that we know to exist on this planet all evolved here? Do we have any assurance? There are ways to gain that assurance by doing comparative DNA sequencing and this sort of thing. Some of you may know my own position, or one of my positions, which is that plants and fungi containing psychoactive compounds are extremely viable candidates for extraterrestrial intruders into the environment of this planet. And this is not to put down Whitley's story, which is a very interesting story, but had he prefaced his story with the comment that before it all happened, he took 5 grams of mushrooms, I doubt he could have sold it to his mother. Because in the world where mushrooms and other psychedelic plants are imbibed, such stories are commonplace. It's no big deal. So I'm always amused by UFO investigators and compilers of data who will tell you, well, the first thing we did is we got rid of all the stories told by anybody who was intoxicated on anything. It seems to me that move has probably absolutely precluded any possibility of understanding what is going on. You see, culture is something that we wear like clothes. And we're very much at ease with culture. Our mind is very much at ease with culture. and we gather the language of a given culture around us. Culture is the mind unperturbed. When a shaman or an ecstatic visionary goes into the wilderness and through ordeal or yogic practice or breath control or the taking of a psychoactive substance perturbs the mind, then we see what the mind is out naked, undressed from the clothing of language and convention. That's why I've made this point over and over again. There will not be a serious discussion of the origin of UFOs, or for that matter, of the nature of consciousness itself, until we leave the utterly culture-bound, provincial, and hick-like attitude that science has foisted on us about perturbing the mind. Without the use of psychedelic substances, I think solving the UFO dilemma is going to be as thankless a task as attempting to understand the nature of the universe without availing yourself of the use of a telescope. It is simply tying our hands behind our backs. Now, there is a third possibility, which is the one that is the more commonly entertained notion, which is simply that we are being observed by intelligent life forms that evolved somewhere else in the galaxy. They have quarantined our planet to keep us from being agitated by their presence, and they will eventually reveal themselves. I find this an extremely odious notion, especially the part about how much chaos there will be if the truth is ever revealed. This is nothing more than the reassertion of masculine paternalism, its right to keep secrets from the rest of us, its belief that there is a privileged all-male class of people who can be let in on what's really going on, and the rest of us, poor dears, have to be shielded from these tremendously shocking facts. I discussed this once with an entity, and it said to me, well, you know, we've disguised ourselves as an extraterrestrial invasion so as to not alarm people with what's really going on. We're getting close to the end, folks. There is a fourth possibility, which I mention only in the interest of thoroughness, which is that these entities and their vehicles are not spacecraft at all, but are in some sense time craft, and that we may be the tremendous sense of empathy with these quite physically unusual beings may arise out of the fact that we're looking into the faces of our great-great-great-grandchildren, who may be emanating back through time, carrying the message, a message about some sort of future event or situation that lies many centuries downstream from us, but that is of such import that from that point, agents are moving backward and possibly forward through time, spreading the news of some kind of mode shift. This doesn't seem to me to be impossible. However, based on my own experience, which is what I think this thing really comes down to, because what we have in the UFO issue is an official position supported by scientists, whether they be Neanderthal right-wingers or doctrinaire Marxists or whatever, a conspiracy of consensus against the personal experiences of individual human beings who are told, well, what you're saying happened to you can't have happened. You are insane, you are mentally ill, you are mistaken. So what we really have here is a political issue. Which do you believe? Your perceptions, memories, and expectations aided by your intellect, or some kind of utterly abstract, official, doctrinaire, sexist philosophy laid on from above? So I think really what the saucers do, if you accept their presence, is they empower us. They empower us to see science for the shell game that it is, to see the past 400 years of Western culture for the pathetic narrowing of the spectrum of allowable phenomena that it is, to the point where people think that if you can't bang on something with a hammer, it isn't real, which to me is just wild talk. I can't even imagine where that kind of thing is coming from. So I think, and I'll just leave you with this final thought, that in lieu of the repression, and it is a repression throughout this century, of legitimately available ways of exploring the modalities of consciousness, and by that I mean psychoactive compounds, the repression of those compounds and their use by science has created a neurotic energy dynamic in the mass psyche. And the mass psyche has begun to hallucinate because the destiny of human beings is to live in the imagination in the hands of the goddess. And wherever that thrust is impeded, psychopathy will result. There will be neurosis. There will be psychic epidemic. There will be confusion. So I believe that until we form a resolution to conduct an unfettered and mature exploration of the human psychology using all the tools available to us, that the skies of Earth will continue to be haunted by flying saucers. They will continue to be haunted by flying saucers and their denizens because they are symbols of our infantilism, of our sense of loss, of our incompleteness. And we can heal that breach by simply recognizing that the true mystery lies within us. The true mystery is in the mind, and its historical promise is the transformation of our society through the abandonment of reason as it has been narrowly defined by this extremely solar, masculine, paternalistic, materialistic legacy that we are the victims of. Well, I could talk for a long time, but I think that's it in a nutshell. Thank you. Thank you.
But the issue is surrender. This is something real. You don't find people going into the ashram in the morning to meditate with their knees knocking in fear because of how terrifying and profound they know that meditation is going to be. But if they were going in there to smoke DMT, they would be fully riveted on the modalities of what was about to happen. I mean, we can tell shit from Shinola. It's just that we don't always prefer Shinola. And I'm not I don't advocate it. People, sometimes there are people who are disappointed because they say, well, how often do you do it? Well, the answer is not very often. I mean, if I can get it in a couple or 3 times a year, I feel like I'm hitting it pretty hard. And the more successful it is, the less often you have to do it. I mean, I know people who say DMT is their most favorite drug. And when you say, well, when was the last time you did it? They say, well, 1967. It only lasted 4 minutes. They're still processing it. And they are still processing it. They're not just whistling Dixie. I mean, it is, to my mind, just the most... well, I mentioned this earlier, the question, how do they keep the lid on this stuff? And I suppose here I'm preaching to the converted,
because many people last night said they had an interest in this kind of thing. But they don't keep the lid on sexuality. No society has ever had it so under control that people didn't have sex. I mean, they may have had sex under weird conditions and under, ritual strictures and this and that. But we are like this salamander that has the option of never developing into its mature form. And to my mind, that's a tragedy, because this is our birthright, and somehow our inability to get a grip on our global problems has to do with this immaturity about our mental state. The two, I feel very strongly, are linked, and that of course we can't get control of the world because we are children in some profound way. And we don't like being children. But the culture has reinforced a form of infantilism. And the way I explain it to myself is it's a kind of unwillingness to go it alone on a certain level. I don't know how many of you remember in Brave New World, Huxley's brilliant dystopia, but there's a scene in there where Bernard, who is the guy who's out of it in the novel, because in his fetal fluid they got an alcohol contaminant. And so he's different from everybody else in this society, and he occasionally has original thoughts. And he and his assigned girlfriend for the evening, or whatever she is, are in a helicopter, and they sweep out past the crematoria where they're recollecting elements for reuse. And he suspends the helicopter over the Black Bay, and she immediately becomes very agitated, restless, anxious, and pleads with him to return to the city. And what it is it's her anxiety over being alone in the presence of nature. She literally can't take it. And I think there are a lot of people in our society, and each of us in our own way at different times, who have within us this neurotic and infantile creature that can't face it alone. And that this going it alone thing is very important. Plotinus, the great Neoplatonic philosopher, he spoke of the mystical experience as the flight of the alone to the alone. And in the psychedelic experience, there is this issue of surrender, because a lot of people want to diddle with it. They want to be able to say they did it, but they don't ever want to face an actual moment where they put it all on the line. And yet the whole issue with this stuff is to let it lead, to let it show what it wants to show. So somehow, individually, we have to reclaim our experience. The real message, more important even than the psychedelic experience, the real message that I try to leave with people in these weekends is the primacy of direct experience. That as people, the real universe is, within your reach, always. Everything not within your reach is basically unconfirmed rumor. And we insert ourselves like ants or honeybees into hierarchies of knowledge. So we say, well, what's going on in the world? Well, turn on CNN, and then somehow we're ordered. Then we say, okay, it's 85 degrees in Baghdad and the wind is out of the northeast at 15 miles an hour. And we feel somehow better now because we're getting the information. But what we have done is sold out direct experience. And all institutions require this of us, that we somehow redefine ourselves for the convenience of the institution. And this redefinition always involves a narrowing, a denial, so that, if you want to be in Marxist society, if you want to function in Marxist society, you have to define yourself as a Marxist human being. Well, it turns out in a Marxist society there are no homosexuals, because that just happens in decadent societies. So then, if you happen to notice any tendency like this in yourself, you have to deny its existence, because this just doesn't happen in a Marxist society. And similarly, every society has this. In our society, if you hear voices, we have mental hospitals for you. If you have vast visions of the future, we have drugs that can help you and make this go away. So then somehow in modern society, the discovery of psychedelics is the discovery that all of this cultural machinery is just Wizard of Oz stuff. You remember the scene in The Wizard of Oz where the curtain is swept back and they see the little guy there, and he says, booming out over the loudspeaker, "Ignore the little man pulling the levers. Ignore the little man pulling the levers." Well, the little man pulling the levers is what sweeps into view with psychedelics, and you discover, culture is provisional. Whether we have 9 wives or 3, whether we tattoo ourselves blue, whether we eat insects or not, all of these things are just decisions that we make. And then we congratulate ourselves on our wisdom, and we live within that, and we hunt down and kill all the people who disagree with us. And that's called having a culture, having a way of life, being somebody. But I don't see history as a wrong turning. I see it, the metaphor that I like is that of the prodigal son, that there was a reason for this long descent into matter, this peregrination. It was a shamanic journey of some sort. The shaman goes into the world pool or ascends the world tree to go to the center of the axis of the cosmos, to recover the pearl or the gift or the lost soul, and then return with it. And this is what history was, I think. It was a descent into the hell worlds of matter, energy, space, and time, for the purpose of recovering something that was lost. It wasn't lost by us. It was lost by the breathing, the disystole of the planet. Just climax of climate moved us into paradise and then moved us out of paradise. I mean, you must, the story of Eden is the story of history's first drug bust. I mean, it's the story of a whole lot of tension over who's going to take or not take a certain plant which confers knowledge. And Yahweh, wandering in the garden, says to himself, if the man and the woman eat of the fruit, they will become as we are. The issue was co-equality, co-knowledge with the Creator. Well, where do we stand, in man's existential march? How does that work? Can we always accept the subservient, infantile position? I mean, is knowledge to be dispensed by gods, and if not gods, then the institutions that appoint themselves as gods over us? Or is it actually that maturity begins with somehow claiming this birthright? And it is a birthright. And I don't know if a society can survive the claiming of this birthright by a large number of people. Certainly in the 1960s, when this was attempted, everybody got very agitated, and then it was frozen out. In so-called primitive or pre-literate societies, there is the office of the shaman. And the shaman is deputized to act for all of us in the same way that we have airplane mechanics to fix jet engines. We have shamans to explore these hidden and fairly terrifying other dimensions. The people who self-select themselves into a group like this, in a society like that, would be the candidates for this kind of shamanic voyaging. The basic notion here, I think, is an idea of radical freedom. I mean, this is not a cult of Terence McKenna. It is not a drug cult. It's a cult of curiosity, if it's a cult of anything. And what you're supposed to understand when you come out of here, that an open mind is a very precious thing, and it should never be given away, perhaps ever, certainly never lightly. The truth can take care of itself. It does not require your belief. The truth need not be treated as fragile. You can beat on the truth with ball-peen hammers and it will do just fine, thank you. So one should be respectful in the presence of truth, but not cowed or awed or something like that. The truth wants to be appreciated. It wants to be known. It can take care of itself. Belief is toxic. All belief. Don't believe in anything. Live in the presence of the felt fact of immediate experience. Everything beyond that is conjecture. In contemporary society, we're always in the past and in the future. But what is real are feelings. And feelings attain a nexus only in the moment. Only in the moment. So, explore the edges. Keep your logical razors sharp. Trust nothing that you haven't verified for yourself. And my faith is that the universe will take you in and share with you its meaning and its intent and its conclusion. So that's it. Thank you very much.